what a Mountain West game we had Saturday night with the Cowboys upsetting the Bulldogs in Laramie. Let's break it down.
Mountain West Conference play is in full swing, and we're back on the Big Mountain, where we bring you a focused take on the Big Ten and the Mountain West.
Steve, what a game we had Saturday night. We were lucky enough to be able to watch this game together. The Wyoming Cowboys versus the Fresno State Bulldogs. It lived up to the billing. I'm sure our Fresno fans maybe aren't as happy about this. But overall, just a great game. Really good college football game. Again, as I said in our preview video that we did, if you guys saw that, was so happy to see this on 8 p.m. primetime, Fox headliner. Fantastic. So let's break it down here a little bit. We're going to go over a little bit of the stats. We're going to go a little bit over what we talked about in our preview video. And I want to kind of bring back up our special guest, Jim, and some of the thoughts that he had and see what came true and maybe what didn't. But let's just break down some team stats here overall. So obviously the score was 24-19 with the Cowboys pulling the upset there against the Bulldogs. First downs in this game, Wyoming had 27. Fresno State had 16. Really big swing kind of in the first half. I mean, the Cowboys just really controlled the first half. And you mentioned they turtled maybe a little bit in the second. I would say more conservative play calling in the second. They played great first half football. Didn't want to do anything crazy to kind of let it slip away. I know there's two different thoughts on that. Keep doing what you're doing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then there's also hey, we've done what we need to do. Let's just be very conservative, very careful, not give anything easy to the other team.
1 point late in the second quarter, so still in the first half of the game, the TV graphic showed that it was 13. The first downs were 13-3.
Yes.
In favor of Wyoming. That's when Wyoming, made most of their money there early in the game, and so 13-3 to start the game. That was a massive way to start.
Well, and it was a perfect way to start for the Cowboys. Fresno gets the ball first, 3 and out.
Yeah,
perfect start for your defense. Yeah. You get your offense on the field there. They drive the field. They eat up minutes. They eat up the running game. We're going to get into Peasley, but wow, what a dominating performance, specifically in the first half from him. But let's look at penalties, because I think this was another key to the game. Fresno State had 8 penalties for 93 yards. Yeah. Wyoming, 2 penalties for 15 yards. Massive yardage difference in terms of penalties there. Multiple hands to the face penalties on Fresno State.
2 or 3 on the same lineman, same guy, number 99.
Yes. Yeah. So that was huge. Then let's just look at yards, overall yards. Offense for Wyoming had 329 yards. Offense for Fresno, 324 yards. So yards were very, very similar. But the Cowboys just able to do what they wanted and needed to do in the first half. I mean, the first half won the game for them. Let's look at some players here. Peasley, who I think was the star, no doubt about it, the star of this game. He won this game for the Cowboys. And Jim, had talked about that in our preview episode. He felt that, he saw Peasley, his best game coming against New Mexico, which was the previous game there. He had a really good game regarding Texas Tech, but he can be up and down. And I mentioned that in the preview. He can be a bit hot and cold. Was he able to ride that momentum from the New Mexico game into this high state game in Fresno, or was he going to maybe wilt a little bit? There was no wilting at all. He was full force, really strong throws, 19 for 27, 183 yards, which most of those yards coming in the first half. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he is a running threat. He had 4 rushes for 25 yards. You compare that to Keene. He was 23 of 35, 218 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. And I know coming in here, Steve, you're very high on Keene and the passing game of Fresno State. But the story here was Peasley and what he was able to do in the passing game for Wyoming, and what the defense could do in holding the Fresno passing game at bay.
Yes, especially in the first half.
Especially in the first half.
Yeah.
And really, you look at the running game here, and Fresno just couldn't get much going. Now, when you're down, obviously you're going to throw more, but Sherrod, 11 carries for 48 yards. Not overly impressive. 2 receptions for 17 yards. Whaley, 22 carries for 83 yards. He got the yards that matter. I mean, 83 yards, it's not a 100-yard game, but when you needed him to step up and get some chunks of yards, he was typically getting them for the Cowboys. Then looking at receivers, Weiland, who I was big on early in the season, loved to see him have kind of a somewhat of a breakout game, if you will, on national television. 5 receptions for 50 yards, 2 touchdowns. I've been big on him all season. He's a great receiver. And then Gill, who's one of the wild cards, we'll get into this in a little bit, but he only had 4 receptions for 24 yards. I know the leading receiver there, I think, had 8 receptions, but I wanted to mention Gill because he was kind of one of our highlights in the preview video.
Yep.
So let's look at the defenses there. Again, this was one of those, hey, YO defense, everybody knows you're supposed to be this stout, one of the best or potentially the best defenses in the league. I know our Air Force fans may say otherwise, but are you going to come and show up, or what do we have here? Because as Jim said in the preview video, they have been giving up a lot of yards so far this season. I mean, you look, they've given up before the Fresno game. 3 of their 5 games, they gave up over 400 yards to teams. So they have been giving up yards, a bit of a bend, don't break mentality. But you look at their linebackers here. Gibbs was one that we kind of showcased in our preview video. And him along with Soriano, total tackles, 20. Solo tackles combined, these 2 combined linebackers, 20 total tackles, 13 solo, 1.5 sacks, 2 tackle for losses. In total, the YO defense had 3 sacks. So really, really strong showing from the defense. And I know, you kind of talked about the defense a little bit. We were talking before we came on here. And I think you wanted to kind of mention, especially in the beginning of the game, what did you see that they were doing that maybe held Fresno at bay?
Yeah, so for me, I think these teams are very evenly matched. Both very good teams. A very even talent level. I didn't see coming in one team to be a lot better than the other. Mm-hmm. But the thing that coming into this game where I said was Wyoming did not appear to be a dynamic offense, whereas I thought that Fresno was. Mm-hmm. Now, so to me this was a chess match between 2 coaches of 2 evenly matched teams, and so Fresno came in. They decided to load the box. When we were watching this live in person, not in person, but we were together live watching this. And
in person would have been fantastic.
Would have been fantastic, yes. But live together, and right away it was apparent that their whole thing was they wanted to make the quarterback beat them.
Yep.
They were loading 8-9 guys in the box, mm-hmm. all up at the line of scrimmage. Even their perimeter defenders were right up at the line, and Wyoming was just bam, 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 hitting those passes behind the backers. Yep. And Fresno State's, their strategy was to come in, let's make the quarterback beat us.
Yep.
And he went and did that in the first half. Yep. He hit those passes. And so once he showed that he could hit those passes, then Fresno had to make that adjustment. They started dropping those backers back. They started spreading out more. Then that opened up the couple runs for Peasley.
Whaley and Peasley,
where then they could get out on those edges.
Yep.
So it was a chess match, and the Wyoming coaches absolutely knocked it out of the park. And I mean, right from the get-go, this game was won by halfway through the second quarter.
Yes.
By Wyoming, by their coaches to go ahead. And I know you're giving Peasley lots of love, which he deserves it because he was hitting those passes.
He was nailing them.
But and for me, I look at it again as that chess match between the coaches. Fresno thought that they had a strategy. Right. We're going to load the box. We're going to stop the run game. We're going to make the quarterback beat us. And he hasn't shown yet this year that he can do that. Mm-hmm. Well, they were wrong. He did it.
Right.
So then they had to make that adjustment. And then they're playing catch up the whole rest of the game. On the other side, I thought that, so then for the Wyoming defensive coaches, mm-hmm. okay, so when Fresno was on offense, Jalen Gill was my wild card to watch.
Right.
I think the Wyoming defensive staff identified him as well. We saw it right away. We were picking up on it. They had a safety over to his side that was bailing out.
Yes.
And so they were covering him. There were some plays where he had a guy underneath him, a guy beside him, and a guy over the top of him.
Right.
And they took him away. I think he had 4 catches for 24 yards.
Yes.
Anytime he did catch the ball, he was immediately surrounded. And that was the story all night. Until we got in that late spurt where Fresno had to come back and had to hit some big plays.
Right.
But for 3/4 of the game, the story was the Wyoming defense. They were playing tight coverage. Sometimes they did mix between man and zone.
Yes.
But whichever defense they were in, they were playing tight up on the receivers and swarming them right away. Where Mikey Keene had very small windows to hit his receivers. A couple times early, those first 2 series, he did hit those receivers and they just dropped it.
Yes.
But even if they would have caught it, the YO defender was right there on him. And so late, and then he just didn't get into a rhythm. Finally, once he did start to get into a rhythm, again, they would complete a pass, and the Wyoming defender was right there on him. And like as you said, they never were able to establish a run game.
Right.
So to me, this game was won in the first and second quarter. The strategy, the game plan that the Wyoming coaches came in with, it worked perfect. It worked to perfection.
Yeah.
The players went out and executed it.
Correct.
Now, I will say in the second half, and I was saying this as we're sitting there, I did question some of the moves by both of the coaching staffs. I thought that Wyoming went a little too conservative, a little too early, and it almost came back to bite them because Fresno did nearly come back. But then I also thought Fresno had their coaching staff, I think, made some bad decisions as far as punting. I mean, they're only going to get so many possessions against Wyoming with that defense. And there was one possession I thought they punted too early.
Yes, you did.
I questioned one of their field goal, going for the field goal. And they just ran out of possessions. I mean, that was, if you're looking at it from the Fresno perspective, they probably feel like they got down early, they were coming back, but they just ran out of possessions. And I will say, I did question Wyoming kicked, I think it was, they attempted a 47-yard field goal. Mm-hmm. And I said before he kicked it, I said, I don't like this. I would pin him deep because if you miss, you're giving Fresno that short field. That's exactly what they need. And that's exactly what happened. They missed.
Right.
So, again, I think the Wyoming won this game in the first half. Yeah. Great coaching, great game plan coming in. Both teams had some both coaching staffs, questionable moves throughout. Mm-hmm. But Wyoming, they came out on top. They were the better team. They had the better game plan, and their players went and executed it.
Well, I'm gonna take it one step further and say I think the game was won in the first quarter, and even maybe the first 2 drives, which really is the first quarter for each team, because it goes back to what you said. First of all, the game plans, which clearly the Wyoming offense had a game plan, and when you saw what the defense was, Peasley had to execute.
Yes,
the coaches called it correctly, and he had to execute, and he did. He was slinging it around. Reception after reception after reception, and you're going, what's going on? And I even said to you at the time, to use a betting term, this Bulldog defense look like they're on tilt. Yeah. They look like they're on tilt. They look like they're one step behind what's being called and the execution of what's being called. That was the first half for the Fresno defense in a nutshell. But along with that, the Pokes had to execute, and they did.
Yeah.
Whereas the very first 2 drives for Fresno, you mentioned the drops. It wasn't Keene was getting the ball where he needed to. Yep. There were several, I'm not going to call them easy catches, but definitely catches that need to be made on a 5-0 team that has a number 24 in the nation.
If you're going to win on the road and win your conference, you need to make those
early
catches.
In that game. I mean, that was huge. Again, those first couple drives for both teams. The play calling and the execution for the Pokes was there. Yep. The play calling and the execution for the Bulldogs wasn't there, and that played out. And you mentioned the second half. That's Craig Bowl football.
Yeah,
that's how he rolls. Like you say, well, Fresno needed just one more. They wanted a couple more. No, that's coaching. They take it away. They run the ball. They eat up clock, and you don't get those possessions to get the points that you think you need. So that is Wyoming Craig Bowl football in a nutshell. The coaches caught it, in my opinion, almost perfectly. I agree. Couple questionable calls here or there, but they called it really, really well, and the players executed about as good as you could expect. I'm throwing a lot of praise onto Peasley, but the receivers were great. Wheeland was great. The tight ends were great. Whaley, just the O-line was doing what they needed to do. Just again, execution was there from the Cowboys. So let's talk real quick. I want to go back to just some of the things we talked about with Jim and our wild cards. I'll heap a little bit of praise onto him because quite frankly,
he nailed it. Shout out to Jim.
Yeah, nailed it, Jim. So, he talked about Peasley. He said, we want to look at him from the, we're going to get the Peasley from the New Mexico game and the Texas Tech game. He did mention that he felt Peasley was maybe playing somewhat injured in the Appy State game, which he didn't look good in at all. I mean, the passing game was horrendous in that game. So I don't know if he was injured or not, but definitely the passing game was way off. And then, from the defensive side, as he knows and a lot of Pope fans know, they've got the talent to get it done.
Yeah.
Very strong front four. Linebackers are great. Kind of a bend, don't break mentality. I wouldn't even say in this game it was, much of a bend, don't break. They played exactly the way they needed to against a very good Fresno State offense. Yep. His wild cards here were limit big plays. I don't know if they really had many big plays.
Well, they're in the second half as they were driving. There was a big catch. What's his name? Moss.
Moss, right.
Moss, who ended up with 9 catches, I think 125 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Well,
a real good game.
And I will say, if you're double, triple teaming Gill, you've got to throw it to the open guy, but the other side of the field. And that may be a big reason why Moss had such a big game was because they were very focused on taking away Gill, and you could see that in the secondary. Again, he mentioned the D effort from the Texas game. D effort was great, and of course the home field advantage up there at your 7,200 feet, your home crowd, 20,000 plus people, all that kind of jazz. He did send me a few pictures. I want to throw them up on the screen real quick while we have them. Again, boots on the ground. Got good old YO fans there. Got them out in the field with the big win. And then Steve, your kind of wild card, and you mentioned earlier was Gill. You said you'd like to see him be at 8+ receptions. They
held him to 4.
And I think the YO defensive coaches were listening because they totally kept him under wraps. Didn't allow him to really become a part of the game at all. And 4 receptions there for him. And I agree with you. He can be a game changer. Yeah. But if you're going to take him out, we'll see what happens here. I mean, this could be a recipe for things to come. Defense is how they play this Fresno State team. I'm not saying a lot of the Mountain West teams have a defense in terms of capabilities and players that Wyoming has, but maybe something to look at there. So, hey, overall, what an enjoyable game. Anything you want to close with, Steve?
So I had 2 points. I want to point out 2 things in the game, and then I do have a message for the Fresno State fans going forward this season.
All right.
So first of all, I want to talk about Peasley. You've been praising him the whole time, and he deserves that praise. I want to give him also even additional credit where I really think he took what the defense was giving him. The beginning when they had those guys, and that's not all college quarterbacks do that. Some college quarterbacks, they have tendencies, they have things they worked on in practice, and they want to stick to it. Things are comfortable. In that first quarter, he was nailing those passes behind the linebackers when they were playing up, and then as they dropped back and spread out, he started to take those runs to the edge.
Right.
Got some critical first downs that kept, and that was. Wyoming and Fresno had about the same amount of yards.
Yes.
But Wyoming had so many more first downs. Those were drives that they kept, sustained drives. They run the clock and whatever. And a big part of that was Peasley taking what the defense gave him. He did that all night.
Yep.
The second point that I wanted to make in the game, the Wyoming offensive line. I said that these were 2 very even matched teams. That it didn't seem like one had a lot more talent than the other. I think if they played 100 times, one team would win 51, the other one would win 49. One area, and you focused a lot on the defense, rightly so. Another additional area, the Wyoming offensive line. I think somewhere in the game they did lose. Their starting center went out. Hopefully he's okay.
Right.
But I was super impressed with the Wyoming offensive line. I'm a Big Ten guy. I'm a Big Ten fan. And that Wyoming offensive line reminded me of a Wisconsin, a Nebraska back in the day, an Iowa, just even a Michigan now.
Yeah.
A dominant offensive line. I thought they did a great job.
Yeah.
Protection-wise, everything all night. And so then for my message for the Fresno State fans, and this is something we were talking about during the game.
Yeah.
Because JY is a huge Wyoming fan, of course. Wyoming has this is a great win for them. I mean, but they have the tougher schedule going forward. Fresno State, they're still in the hunt to be in that championship game.
For sure.
If they go through the rest of this Mountain West Conference schedule, they would be a lock to be back in the championship game. Maybe in a rematch against Wyoming, or against the winner. I see. Fresno can run the tables the rest of the year.
Right.
I see them playing the winner of the Wyoming Air Force game. In the championship game. So they may get another shot at a neutral field at this Wyoming team.
Good point.
So I'm hoping Mikey Keene is fine going forward. We did see a couple things. There's been nothing officially released. We couldn't find anything from the team, nothing official. So we don't have official news on Mikey Keene. Yeah. However, we've seen some smoke that they think maybe he's going to be okay. Looks like an ankle and not a knee.
Right.
So we're hopeful he's going to be back. So a lot of hope, a lot of reason to still be optimistic for the Fresno State fans.
No doubt. I know we pretty Cowboy centric here on this review, but yeah, I mean Fresno. I'm sure the fans were wanting to see a little bit more out of their team than maybe what they got, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Cowboys here, but. Yeah, I mean, Mikey Keene is a fantastic quarterback. I hope he's able to play this week. They got a Utah State here coming up who I haven't figured out yet. I mean, I know they can score points, but their defense isn't anything good. But they put it to Colorado State. Yeah. So this isn't, kind of a walkover here for Fresno. They're going to have to definitely get some points on the board to get past Utah State. And then, as you said, Wyoming, they go right at Air Force now. So they got to go down to Air Force. Then they get their bye week, which is nice, and then they'll have Boise after that. So, they got the one big win here with the Fresno Bulldogs coming into town, but now they got to go to Air Force, and I agree with you. I think that certainly as we sit here today in the Mountain West, the winner of the Wyoming Air Force game, one of them, whoever wins that game, should be going to the Mountain West Championship game. I'm not sure who the other team will be. If Fresno runs the table, you're right. I think it'll be the Bulldogs. And Boise, they're just struggling here a little bit. They could still put it together and make it, but I'm not sure. And I wanted to bring up Whaley. You brought up Keene's injury. Whaley was injured there as well. Coach did mention in the press conference after the game that he doesn't think it's serious. Again, ankle, not knee.
Said not season ending.
Not season ending, and potentially available for the Air Force game. So, good news on the injury front for, I think, both teams, hopefully. That both, it's two of their star players, the Keene and Whaley, will be back, if not in a week, hopefully in two. So
I want one last note, JY.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we gave Jim some props. He was basically on this game. He had it pegged. I want to give JY some props here, okay?
Goodness.
So we did our season preview, and JY had Wyoming easily hitting the over on win totals I think it was 5.5.
Unbelievably
they're already 5-1. They have to win one more game to do that. And you had them finishing up in the top 3 or 4 in the conference.
I had them, I think 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you got a lot of pushback on that, even from Wyoming fans, saying, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's higher on Wyoming than even Wyoming is on themselves.
Yeah.
And so far, there's a lot of football to play yet, but so far you pegged it exactly. You should revel in your glory a little bit here. 5-1. Their only loss is to a top 10 team in the country in Texas. Just got a huge win over. Fresno's defending champions of
yes.
So over the defending Mountain West champions, a ranked team at home. They got a huge matchup coming up with Air Force, but even if they were to lose that game, your prediction has been spot on with Wyoming, and I think you had more faith in Wyoming than any other Wyoming fan, except for maybe Jim. And so far, it's proved to be spot on. So shout out to you, credit to you for this. Well, because it's been a great season already for Wyoming.
Yeah, and thank you for giving me a little pat in the back. Not all of my picks have been hitting in our pick episodes, but definitely I locked that one. And I just had faith in Peasley. I'll be honest with you. Like, I saw what he was last year. I know people were questioning his ability. Yeah. His ability's there. Am I surprised he's doing maybe as well as he is right now? Yeah, he's even, exceeding my expectations. And I had fairly high expectations for him. I thought he would have a very big step forward this year. He clearly has. Again, we're only about halfway through the season here, or getting close, and we only just started our Mountain West game. So a lot of season to go. Just feeling real good for the Cowpokes. And I think the Bulldogs absolutely should be feeling great as well. These two teams will be fun to watch the rest of the season. I'm excited for the Mountain West. I'm excited for the Bulldogs, and I'm excited for the Cowboys.
So if I want you to, let's make this deal.
Okay.
If Wyoming beats Air Force next week,
Yes.
we're gonna show the viewers at home your Cowboy dance celebration
Oh, gosh.
of whenever Wyoming scores a touchdown.
All right. We'll think about that.
If they beat Air Force, we're
we'll
gonna
think
show
about that. Okay. We'll think about that. Anyway, hey, we appreciate you tuning in here. We like to have some fun. We like watching good college football games, and this is one hell of a college football game. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.